What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of BTB RV Rants. Let's dive straight into the questions. So the first question is a bit of a tricky question. It's from a viewer who has a truck and tows a 40-foot long fifth wheel. Now, they are in a scenario where they want to find out if they attach a winch to a front receiver on the truck, would it be capable enough of towing or pulling a 26,000-pound combined rig, which means the truck and the trailer. I can't answer that question with any level of certainty because I don't know a lot of different things. Regardless of the strength of the winch that you have, how you're stuck is probably more important than what you're using to get yourself out. If you are bogged down in deep mud, in deep sand, if you're in a scenario where you're going up a hill, all of that is going to impact the ability of a winch to pull you out. You know, 8 times out of 10, even a relatively weak winch can get you moving enough to get you out of a rough situation. That being said, I don't know what a rough situation for some people is versus other people. That also being said, if you plan on getting a winch, I generally recommend going with the largest winch that your receiver or your truck is capable of supporting without causing damage to it. So to answer your question, there's really no way for me to give you a definitive answer. There's so many things that come into play when it comes to winching, such as if you're using multiple snatch blocks, what your anchoring point is. Is your anchoring point enough to actually support the weight of whatever you're trying to get unstuck? So you really have to understand all of that. And the more you understand about winching in general, the more experience that you have will also lend into that. So I'm sorry, but I can't really give you a clear answer for that one. Now, the next question is from a viewer who is asking me about RV roofs and why I haven't really done any videos on them and apparently why they're so junky. Now, I would tend to disagree with that. I don't believe the RV roof material, which is generally a one-piece rubber membrane that's stretched all the way across the top of a roof, or a fiberglass option if you go with your higher end or even really small units, I don't believe they're necessarily junky. I think it all comes down to how well it was installed, how well it was cut around certain openings like vents, air conditionings, and plumbing ventilation. But more importantly, it comes down to the final fit and finish, how they actually assembled everything, put everything together, secured it, and sealed it up. I've seen roofs that were pulled over RVs that are 10 years old and they're still really in great shape. I've seen roofs that have been on RVs for only a couple of years and they're really in bad shape. Some of the biggest factors that help determine how well your roof is going to hold up over time is it properly maintained? Do you clean it off? What do you park underneath? Do you park underneath trees that drop sap, pine cones, pine needles, things that could potentially damage it? Have you driven through any type of inclement weather such as a hailstorm or anything that could really impact it from that sense? How often it's actually sitting out and exposed to the sun? In those particular cases, you do have to be aware that a rubber roof does still have chemicals in it, and they're going to dry up, crack over a period of time, especially if it's sitting out in intense sun for prolonged periods of time. That being said, the best way to generally store an RV would be in some type of a covered or enclosed storage area where the roof is not exposed to sun if it's not being used. And then more importantly than anything, to make sure that it's clean, make sure that it's maintained, always check for tears, little things that could have formed over traveling, over the expansion and contraction of your RV while you're using it, while you're driving down the road, while it's flexing. All of those things can contribute to how long your roof lasts. Yes, there are better techniques to put on top of roofs, but oftentimes people aren't willing to pay for that when those techniques can be anywhere upwards of $6,000 to $8,000 over what the normal price would be. Now, the next question is from a viewer who drives a 2019 Ram 3500 heavy-duty crew cab 4-wheel drive long bed truck. Now, if you're not aware, that is the new body style Ram 3500 truck. Basically, he moved up from a half-ton and he's moved to a 1-ton dually, and he's saying that the thing shakes his guts out. It is just a really rough ride. He's tried just about everything, including lowering his tire pressure, installing Celastic shocks, as well as considering dropping his tire pressure down even lower than where he already has it. Okay, so taking into account the things you've done, in my opinion, there's really only a few other things you could try, but you would really be taking on the liability and responsibility of doing these yourself, as I can't necessarily recommend that you do either one. One would be to do a full airbag replacement, essentially have the entire suspension swapped out with like a Kelderman setup or something that would replace the leaf springs with something that's a little bit more variable in terms of how you can adjust it. The second one, which is probably the more cost-effective one, would be to remove a few of your leaf springs, perhaps one leaf spring off each side, and then go with an airbag setup so you can maintain the ride height and your cargo carrying capabilities. The next question is from a viewer who recently purchased a 2019 F350 four-wheel drive truck, and the problem he's having now is that the back end of the truck is too high, which causes the front end of the fifth wheel to be too high and the back end to slant down a little too low to the road. He's wondering what he should do. Now, he put a couple suggestions. The first one is to perhaps install a 2-inch lift block on the rear suspension of the fifth wheel, essentially like a lift block you'd put on a vehicle, and that might increase the height of the fifth wheel. I told him I don't really recommend that because you run into the scenario that the angle when you turn with the fifth wheel puts so much side-to-side stress on the suspension it could cause some type of a failure at some point. Now, I'm not 100% sure if that would happen, but I would definitely be cautious of that, just considering how much the suspension articulates side to side when you are turning. The second one is to install the Moride SRE 4000 upgrade, which is what I have on our fifth wheel, which gives you approximately 1.25 inches or 1.75 inches lift over the factory equalizer. That's kind of a good direction to go. That will definitely give you a little bit of a lift, and it might be enough to help straighten out or level the trailer. So that's something you could definitely try. That would also be an improvement in terms of the suspension of your fifth wheel. And then the final one would be to switch to something that gives him more of the ability to lower the front end closer to the bed rails. So he would be essentially eliminating the 6-inch gap between the top of the bed rails and the overhang of the fifth wheel and going to more of like a 4 or 5 inch. And I would not advise for that because you might find yourself in scenarios where that could cause damage to the fifth wheel or the truck. In my opinion, adding something like the Moride SRE 4000 is a good option, possibly taking it to a welding shop and adding an extension to the bottom of the frame, like a boxed section, as long as it's engineered and constructed and attached properly, or perhaps even going to a taller profile wheel and tire, which might give you some extra clearance. Now, what I would probably say is the two best options would be to go with the taller profile tire and the Moride SRE 4000, which should give you about a 2-inch lift in the back over what it currently is. And the last question is from a viewer, and it's actually from multiple viewers who have sent me this question related to a Lance travel trailer that I filmed at RVX while I was in Salt Lake City several months ago. Apparently it was a prototype model or a coming soon model that hasn't been released yet because it's definitely not on their website, and on the floor model they did not have a model number on the side of it, so I can't provide you with that. But it was a really cool floor plan, and it's definitely one that you might want to check out if you haven't seen my videos from RVX. Anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you haven't had a chance, please take a moment, subscribe to this channel as well as my main channel, Big Truck Big RV. As always, thank you. I definitely want to give a big shout out to the people who made my Big Truck Big RV channel hit 200,000 subscribers. That is awesome. I want to thank all my subscribers, followers, and viewers for that, and I will come back to you and talk to you again soon.